Hey guys, welcome back to the Bulwark YouTube. I'm here with Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. We're going to be talking presidential pardons, but not for Hunter, for other people that the White House may be considering. Before we get to that, just a quick note. As always, do subscribe to our YouTube page. Button's right there. Doesn't harm anybody. Could help some people. So yes, we need the audience. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Look, I reached out to you because I saw a piece in Politico about preemptive pardons. Basically, the gist is inside the White House, they are thinking of giving preemptive pardons to people who may have crossed the Trump administration, the Trump team, with investigations, work on the January 6th committee, things like that, or just general criticism, honestly. This would be sort of I think in a legal world, kind of a revolutionary approach to the pardon power. But you are quoted by our good friend Jonathan Martin embracing the idea. Can you tell me why you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, so I sent out a press release this week calling on the administration to do something that I can't believe I'm even saying it, but that is to issue mass pardons, beginning with everyone who the FBI appointee Kash Patel explicitly put in his own book that is on his hit list, his enemies list, which is, he believes, also Trump's enemies list, and that he is openly saying he is planning on using the Justice Department to go after. So these are people like General Milley, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, Cassidy Hutchinson. These people, I'm very sad to say, are now at real risk because of what Donald Trump and Kash Patel are openly saying they intend to do. So if you had told me, 8 years ago that I would ever be calling for something like this, I would have said that's crazy. But I think we have to wake up and recognize the time for cautious restraint is over. We need to make sure we use every protection for these poor people, many of whom, all of them are just great public servants who are doing the right thing, and they need to be protected.
How would it work? I'm not a lawyer, so forgive me if I'm being naive about this, but they haven't committed a crime.
Right.
They're potentially going to be charged, but we're not sure with what or if they'll even be charged, although I think we can agree it's fairly explicit that Kash Patel and others do want to, they say they want to go after them. But how does it work in practice?
Yeah, so admittedly, this is novel because you point out accurately, these people haven't committed any crimes.
Right, so what can you pardon them for?
Their crime was, the fact they haven't committed any crimes is not going to stop the new head of the FBI from investigating them and coming up with something to charge them. So there have been actually instances in the past where the president has used the pardon power to pardon a wide swath of people, a class. Famous examples, Jimmy Carter pardoning all of those who dodged the draft in the 1970s. So there's no question that the president can pardon an entire class of people. So that's on the amount, number one. Number two, in terms of how you pardon someone who hasn't been charged, you actually can do that preemptively. Remember when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, Nixon had not been criminally charged with anything, but Ford was able to pardon him and word it in such a way that it covered anything he could have been charged with relating to Watergate. So I do think, based on those two precedents as well as others, there is a way that this can be structured to ensure that patriotic Americans who are just simply doing the right thing do get that extra protection they now need from this incoming administration.
So the pushback to this, not from the MAGA types, but from Democrats, and even we've heard from some of the Never Trumpers, including people who, in theory, could potentially be targeted, is that one, it would be perceived as an admission of some sort of nefarious act or guilt. And two, unless you're like at the top echelon, let's say you're sort of a mid-level figure, it puts a target on you unnecessarily, right? Let's say you were just working on the J6 committee. The White House might be worried about the fact that you could potentially be targeted. No one really knows who you are, but suddenly you get this pardon, and now the Trump people are like, ooh, I should go after that person. What do you say to those two elements of pushback?
So to the first criticism or pushback, I think that's a fair point. And I can understand what, for example, I serve with Adam Schiff,
Right.
who is an outstanding person, was doing his congressional duty and did it quite well. Donald Trump will talk about how well Adam Schiff did by virtue of the fact that Trump still talks about him years later.
Can't stop talking about him.
Yeah, including the days leading into the election.
Yeah.
So I can understand why an honorable man like Adam Schiff would say, "Hey, I haven't done anything wrong. I don't want to accept this pardon." Um, I would point out to him, not only as a colleague but as a friend, given that we are in abnormal times with an abnormal administration coming in, that calls for doing things you otherwise heretofore would not have done.
Right.
So that's number one. To number two, in terms of the, hey, don't name someone who isn't being paid attention to. Well, we already have Kash Patel's enemies list that was published in his own book. So I would start with that list. We also have other lists that are out there that have been published of an enemies list. I think one of them included every member of Congress who voted for impeachment, for example. So I think that anyone who has already been explicitly named by Trump or Patel or Steve Bannon, that would be a very good place to start.
I was talking with Chris Murphy about this, not about this specifically, but about his fears for a Trump administration. And he was pretty bleak, to be honest. He's like, I'm worried about a dystopian nightmare. I think that was his words. He fears legitimately that they are going to try to arrest lawmakers. Is that where your head's at too?
You know, I'm going so against my normal personality because I'm by nature not an alarmist, and I'm generally an optimist.
Okay.
I am, however, when it comes to this incoming administration, of the view that people aren't alarmed enough. I think the fact that Trump was president for 4 years, there's this been kind of, people have been lulled to sleep. Well, they haven't recognized that there's a big difference between Trump 1.0 and what we're about to see with Trump 2.0. Right. Trump 1.0, you still had traditional pre-MAGA Republicans who populated that administration. You had people like General Milley and Mattis, and Paul Ryan was still around, and all of these sort of normal Trump or normal Reagan Bush Republicans who were able to provide checks and balances or some check on Trump. They're all gone. This is the magnified Republican Party. It would have been unthinkable 8 years ago for someone like Kash Patel to be nominated as Trump's FBI director. We're in a very different game now. So I'm generally of the Chris Murphy view when it comes to this. And I do fear that people are perhaps being lulled to sleep about the real danger that we face.
On the issue of preemptive pardons, the piece that Jonathan Martin wrote reveals that, in fact, at the White House counsel's office and with the White House chief of staff, the topic is being discussed. They're exploring the legality of it, seeing how broad they may go. What is your understanding about the state of discussions inside the White House?
Yeah, I don't have a good window into that. I mean, obviously, I've been a longtime supporter of the president. I have a number of close friends over there. But I wanted to make my push public. If you talk to other Democratic lawmakers just casually, I can tell you I've gotten very positive feedback on this. I mean, I recognize, again, it's absolutely extraordinary what I'm calling for, but it needs to be done. And I'm glad that the White House is seriously considering it.
Have you talked to anyone at the White House about it?
I've expressed to one or two people my strongly held view on it, but I haven't talked to anyone in the chief counsel's area that I think is more exploring the very practical implications of this. Right. Because, as we talked about, this is not something that generally has been done before. Well, we haven't faced the kind of threat
yes.
that we're
in uncharted territories here. Are you surprised that Kash Patel, that there is? I don't want to label where things stand with his nomination because we just don't know yet. But I think it's fair to say that there's been a open willingness among Senate Republicans to confirm him. And frankly, the gist of it is that Donald Trump should be entitled to the FBI director of his choice, which is not actually how this traditionally works. It's a 10-year term meant to go beyond presidencies, overlap between presidencies. Are you surprised that Patel has not generated more freakout and pushback?
My operating assumption is that I fully expect there will be few to zero instances in which we see 4 Republican senators actually have the backbone to stand up to Donald Trump.
We saw one. We got Gates.
Still didn't go to a vote, though.
Okay, so this has
they were able to do it.
Yeah.
They were able to do it quietly.
I'm with you. I think if you do it quietly
Correct.
and they don't have to vote, then it might happen. But if anything gets to a vote.
It also helped that Gates had personally developed so many Republican enemies that he was really sort of a special case. But no, look, I will be happy to be proven wrong on this. But I think the number of instances in which we see 4 Republican senators stand up and publicly vote against Trump, I think those instances will be few and far between. So that's a long way of saying, no, I'm not surprised in the least that there's been so little pushback to someone who is so grossly unqualified like Kash Patel.
All right, Congressman, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. Definitely keep us posted on any developments you have on the preemptive pardon idea. Congressman Brendan Boyle, thanks so much.
Thank you.